In 1876, on Montana's Little Bighorn Hills, 268 U.S. soldiers perished, their mutilated remains scattered across a battlefield where 5,000 artifacts, bullets, cartridges, and bones later told a brutal tale. Chief Sitting Bull, in beaded buckskin, rifle in hand, rallied 1,500 Lakota and Cheyenne warriors, wielding 47 types of firearms, as archaeologist Douglas Scott uncovered. "It will be a good day to die," Sitting Bull vowed, per historian D. Brown's account. Yet, the myth of Custer's gallant last stand, with only 56 bodies identifiable, unravels amid evidence of panic against a native force defending their homeland. How did 210 of Custer's men fall in just 90 minutes? Discover the stark truth behind this iconic defeat. The roots of this tragedy trace to the resolve of Sioux Chief Sitting Bull, a spiritual and military leader who refused to bow to U.S. demands. Clad in buckskin adorned with beads, his piercing gaze fixed on the horizon, Sitting Bull united the Lakota, Cheyenne, and other Plains tribes in a bold stand. By 1876, the U.S. government had launched a campaign to force these tribes onto reservations, stripping them of their nomadic way of life. Sitting Bull, aged about 45, sent messengers to reservation tribes, urging them to join his camp. Over 1,000 families answered, swelling his ranks. As historian Robert M. Utley notes, Sitting Bull's vision was not just resistance but survival of a people. His call forged a coalition that would challenge the might of the U.S. Army. At the heart of the U.S. effort stood George Armstrong Custer, a 36-year-old lieutenant colonel whose fame was forged in the Civil War. With his flowing blonde hair and tailored blue uniform, Custer cut a dashing figure, often seen galloping ahead of his men, saber gleaming. Leading the 7th Cavalry, a regiment of 600 seasoned troops, he embodied the era's confidence in military superiority. The 7th was renowned for its rapid maneuvers, having quelled uprisings across the frontier. Yet, as historian James Donovan observes, Custer's charisma masked a reckless streak. His reputation as a fearless commander, built on victories like the Battle of Gettysburg, made him a national celebrity, but it also bred overconfidence that would prove fatal. The U.S. Army's disdain for native tribes fueled this impending disaster. Officers viewed the Lakota and Cheyenne as savages, armed only with bows and arrows, incapable of matching disciplined cavalry. This prejudice blinded them to the tribe's military prowess. By 1876, the Northern Plains tribes had access to firearms through trade, with over 800 warriors carrying rifles, as archaeological evidence later confirmed. General Philip Sheridan, architect of the campaign, dismissed their strength, believing a swift strike would crush resistance. Historian D. Brown writes, "The Army's contempt for native warriors was a fatal misjudgment. This underestimation set the stage for a rude awakening on the Little Bighorn's banks." Sitting Bull's camp, sprawling across the valley, housed over 1,500 warriors, a force unprecedented in its size. By June, an estimated 7,000 people, including women and children, filled the encampment, their teepees dotting the landscape for miles. These warriors, many in their 20s, were not just numerous but skilled, trained from youth in hunting and combat. Leaders like Crazy Horse, a 34-year-old Oglala Lakota, brought tactical brilliance, favoring ambushes and swift strikes. As Utley records, the native coalition was a formidable army, united by a shared resolve to protect their lands. Custer, expecting a smaller, disorganized foe, was unaware of the juggernaut awaiting him. Custer's first critical error was dividing his 600-man regiment into 3 battalions, a move that diluted his strength. On the 25th of June, he stood atop a bluff, his blue coat flapping in the wind, surveying the valley below. Believing speed was his ally, he split his forces to encircle the native camp. This decision, rooted in his success against smaller tribes, ignored the scale of his current enemy. Historian Evan S. Connell argues, Custer's division of forces was a gamble that defied logic. By fragmenting his command, Custer ensured no single unit could withstand the native counterattack, setting a domino effect in motion. Captain Frederick Benteen, a grizzled 41-year-old veteran, was tasked with blocking escape routes to the south. Leading 125 men, Benteen rode off with orders to prevent native families from fleeing. His detachment, armed with Springfield carbines, was meant to tighten the noose around the camp. Meanwhile, Major Marcus Reno, 41, was assigned the direct assault. With 175 men, Reno was to charge the southern end of the village, drawing warriors into open combat. As Donovan notes, Custer's plan relied on perfect coordination, a fantasy given the terrain and enemy numbers. Benteen's absence would later leave Custer critically exposed. Custer himself took 210 men north, climbing ridges to flank the native camp. As he crested a hill, his scout, Mitch Boyer, pointed to a sea of teepees below. Accounts from native survivors, like White Man Runs Him, describe Custer's face draining of color, his gloved hand gripping his reins tightly. The camp stretched 3 miles, housing over 1,500 warriors, far beyond the 800 he had estimated. Despite this, Custer pressed on, believing his reputation would carry the day. Connell writes, Custer saw not a threat but an opportunity for glory. His underestimation of the enemy's scale was a fatal misstep. Native scouts, including Crow allies like White Man Runs Him, urgently warned Custer of the overwhelming odds. Standing beside him, they gestured to the valley, their voices tense. Too many, they said, urging him to wait for reinforcements. Custer, adjusting his wide-brimmed hat, dismissed their pleas, convinced his 7th Cavalry could scatter the warriors. As Ambrose states, Custer's refusal to heed his scouts was not just arrogance, but a death sentence. His decision to attack, ignoring the scouts' 100 years of collective experience, reflected a hubris that would cost lives. Reno's attack unraveled swiftly, exposing Custer's flank. Charging with 175 men, Reno's troops galloped toward the camp, kicking up dust. Within minutes, over 500 native warriors, led by Gall, a 36-year-old Hunkpapa Sioux, swarmed them. Armed with Henry rifles, they fired rapidly, downing 40 of Reno's men in 20 minutes. Reno, his face flushed, ordered a retreat to a hilltop, leaving 30 dead. Utley notes, Reno's failure shattered Custer's plan, leaving his battalion isolated. This collapse forced Custer to face the full might of the native force alone, sealing his fate. As George Armstrong Custer led his 210 men into Medicine Tail Coulee, a narrow valley carved by the Little Bighorn River, he rode into a trap from which none would escape. On the 25th of June, 1876, his blue-coated troopers, dust swirling around their horses, descended the ravine, unaware of the 1,500 Lakota and Cheyenne warriors massing nearby. The valley, flanked by steep ridges, offered no cover, funneling Custer's men into a killing zone. Historian James Donovan describes this move as a fatal blunder, exposing Custer to an enemy he could neither outrun nor outfight. Native warriors, concealed behind hills, watched their prey approach, their rifles glinting in the midday sun. This was not a battlefield for heroics, but a crucible of annihilation. The Battle of Little Bighorn raged for a mere 90 minutes, yet it claimed 268 U.S. lives, with 210 from Custer's battalion alone. By contrast, over 50 native warriors and an unknown number of women and children perished, their losses often overlooked by early accounts. The speed of the slaughter stunned later investigators. In less than 2 hours, an entire wing of the 7th Cavalry vanished. As historian Robert M. Utley writes, the battle's brevity belied its ferocity, a whirlwind of violence that left no time for strategy. White marble markers, erected later, now dot the battlefield, each one a silent testament to where a soldier fell, their placement mapped by horrified comrades who buried the dead. Native oral traditions, long dismissed by white historians, paint a vivid picture of chaos among Custer's men. Lakota and Cheyenne accounts, preserved by figures like Joel Medicine Crow, describe soldiers firing wildly into the air, their discipline crumbling. Some troopers, overwhelmed, fled on foot, only to be cut down. White Bull, a Cheyenne warrior, recalled, the white men acted as if beside themselves, as quoted by historian D. Brown. These testimonies, once deemed unreliable, reveal a stark truth. There was no gallant stand, only desperation. The native perspective, grounded in first-hand observation, challenges the romanticized myth of Custer's heroism. offering a sobering corrective to a century of bias. The Lakota and Cheyenne warriors wielded an arsenal far beyond the bows and arrows of popular lore. Archaeological digs uncovered evidence of over 47 firearm types, from flintlock muskets to cutting-edge repeating rifles. Over 800 warriors, nearly half the native force, carried guns, acquired through trade with frontier posts. Leaders like Crazy Horse, gripping a Winchester, directed volleys with precision. As archaeologist Douglas Scott notes, the diversity of native weaponry was staggering, a testament to their adaptability. This firepower, combined with their knowledge of the terrain, turned the battlefield into a death trap for the 7th Cavalry, shattering stereotypes of a primitive foe. Excavations at Little Bighorn unearthed over 5,000 artifacts, each a fragment of the battle's brutal story. Spent cartridge cases, lead bullets, and even a wedding ring still encircling a fingerbone revealed the intensity of the fighting. Of these, 1,500 cartridges were meticulously analyzed, their firing pin marks mapped to trace weapon movements. The sheer volume of native bullets, found embedded at trooper positions, underscored their overwhelming firepower. Historian Evan S. Connell remarks, "The artifacts speak louder than any legend, proving the native warriors' dominance." These findings, cataloged over decades, transformed the battlefield into a crime scene, where science rewrote a distorted narrative. The native warriors' Henry repeating rifles, capable of firing 13 rounds in 30 seconds, outclassed the 7th Cavalry's Springfield carbines, which managed only 4 shots in the same time. A trooper, reloading his single-shot weapon, was vulnerable to a warrior's rapid fire, especially at close range. Tests conducted by Scott's team confirmed the Henry's 3-to-1 advantage, a critical edge in the battle's frenetic pace. As Utley observes, the Springfield's long-range accuracy was useless when warriors closed within 200 yards. This technological disparity, often ignored in early accounts, shifted the battle's momentum decisively to the native side. With over 800 armed warriors, the native force outgunned Custer's 210 men by a 4-to-1 ratio, demolishing the myth of a bow and arrow skirmish. The 7th Cavalry carried 45,000 rounds of ammunition, yet only a fraction was fired, as panic overtook discipline. Native warriors, by contrast, expended thousands of rounds, their cartridge cases littering the ridges. Donovan writes, "Custer faced not a rabble but a well-armed army, united and relentless." This imbalance, rooted in the Army's underestimation, exposed the folly of assuming technological superiority over a foe honed by years of survival. Analysis of cartridge cases revealed a chilling detail: weapons moved across the battlefield, likely seized from fallen troopers. Douglas Scott's team matched firing pin impressions, finding identical marks on cartridges a quarter-mile apart, from Calhoun Hill to Last Stand Hill. This suggests warriors captured Springfield carbines, turning them against Custer's men. As Connell notes, the Indians' ability to adapt mid-battle was a masterstroke. Such evidence underscores their tactical acumen, transforming captured arms into tools of victory, a grim irony for a regiment priding itself on firepower. The native warriors' tactics exploited the rugged terrain with devastating effect. Concealed in gullies and behind ridges, they fired from cover, popping up to unleash volleys before vanishing. Leaders like Gall, directing from horseback, used the landscape to outmaneuver the cavalry. Over 200 cartridge clusters, found in these natural fortifications, confirm their strategic use of the ground. Utley states, "The natives fought as hunters, instinctive and lethal, while the army floundered in open ground. This mastery of terrain, honed over generations, turned Little Bighorn into a battlefield where mobility trumped rigid formations." Near marker 128, archaeologists uncovered a trooper's bones, a young man of 19 to 21, his skeleton a catalog of horrors. His jaw was shattered by blunt force, his femurs bore axe marks, and a bullet remained lodged in his wrist. A knife cut on his collarbone hinted at a final, close-range blow. Scott's analysis revealed massive trauma, indicative of ferocious combat. These wounds, found in a shallow burial pit, reflect the battle's savagery, where native warriors, wielding traditional and modern weapons, overwhelmed their foes. This single skeleton, one of 44 excavated, speaks for the countless lives extinguished in those frantic 90 minutes. Among the fallen at Little Bighorn, one soldier's remains tell a story of both tragedy and identity. Vincent Charlie, a 28-year-old Swiss immigrant, stood taller than most at 5 feet 10 inches, his blue uniform now a tattered memory. His skeleton, unearthed near the battlefield, bore a gunshot wound to the hip, the bullet's fragments embedded in bone, and a wooden stick gruesomely jammed down his throat, a native ritual to mark a defeated foe. As archaeologist Douglas Scott notes, Charlie's injuries reflect the battle's ferocity and the cultural practices of the victors. Identified by these distinctive wounds, Charlie represents the 40% of the 7th Cavalry born abroad, men drawn to America's promise only to meet their end in a Montana valley. His story, pieced together from bones, humanizes a conflict often reduced to myth. The skeletal remains of Custer's men reveal a grim truth about their condition. Many, averaging just 22 years old, suffered from rotted teeth, blackened by pipe tobacco, and arthritis that stiffened their joints. One trooper's vertebra showed disc degeneration, a sign of a grueling life on the frontier. With an average height of 5 feet 7 inches and weight of 150 pounds, these soldiers were hardly the elite force of legend. Half were immigrants from Ireland, England, and Germany, driven by poverty to enlist. Historian James Donovan observes, "The 7th Cavalry was a ragtag band, ill-fed and worn down. Their poor health, evident in every excavated bone, underscores a military stretched thin, unprepared for the ordeal awaiting them." Exhaustion plagued Custer's troops as they rode into battle. For 6 weeks, since departing Fort Abraham Lincoln on May 17, 1876, they had marched over 400 miles across rugged plains. Sleeping little, eating sparse rations of hardtack and bacon, they were in no shape to face 1,500 well-rested native warriors. By the 25th of June, after an all-night march, their backs ached and their spirits sagged. As historian Robert M. Utley writes, "Fatigue dulled their reflexes, contributing to their collapse. The contrast was stark. Native fighters, encamped for days, were fueled by fresh game and resolve. Their energy, a decisive edge in the battle's swift, brutal course." The myth of a heroic last stand on Custer Hill, immortalized in paintings and tales, crumbles under scrutiny. Archaeological digs found scant evidence of a disciplined defense. Only a handful of Springfield cartridge cases littered the hill, compared to hundreds of native bullets. Instead of a gallant holdout, the site suggests a rout, with troopers overwhelmed in minutes. Historian Evan S. Connell argues, "The last stand was a fiction, born of a need to glorify defeat." This revelation dismantles a century-old narrative, replacing it with a sobering reality of panic and slaughter, far from the heroic tableau etched in American lore. The final fighting unfolded not on Custer Hill but in Deep Ravine, a jagged gully where 28 soldiers met their end. Native accounts, like that of Northern Cheyenne warrior Tallbull, described troopers fleeing down the slope, only to be cut down by warriors firing from above. Despite extensive searches, their bodies remain unfound, lost to the earth. Scott's team recovered Indian cartridge cases along the ravine's edges, evidence of a deadly crossfire. As Utley notes, Deep Ravine was the true last stand, a desperate scramble, not a noble fight. This shift in focus reorients the battle's climax, honoring the native warriors' relentless pursuit. After the battle, native warriors mutilated the fallen, a practice rooted in spiritual belief. Scalps were taken, limbs severed, and faces crushed to weaken enemies in the afterlife. One trooper's skull, found with knife marks inside the eye socket, suggests a ritualistic act. Over 200 bodies bore such wounds, with 56 too disfigured to identify. Historian D. Brown explains, "To the Lakota and Cheyenne, this was not savagery but a sacred act." Misunderstood by white observers, these rituals fueled stereotypes, yet they reflect a worldview where death carried cosmic weight, a perspective that demands respect. White marble markers, 255 in total, stand across the Little Bighorn battlefield, each pinpointing where a soldier fell. From Last Stand Hill, where 40 markers cluster, to the scattered stones along Deep Ravine, they form a haunting map of defeat. Erected in 1890, these memorials are unique, as no other battlefield so precisely marks its dead. Connell writes, "The markers are silent witnesses to a catastrophe. They guide visitors through the chaos, from the South skirmish line, where troopers first faltered, to the ravine where the last shots rang out, a stark reminder of the battle's scale." The 7th Cavalry's Springfield carbines, with a range of 600 yards, were formidable at a distance but faltered in close combat. Each trooper carried 100 rounds, yet many died with ammunition unfired, overwhelmed before they could reload. Native warriors, wielding Henry rifles effective within 200 yards, closed the gap swiftly. A 30-second test showed the Henry firing 13 rounds to the Springfield's 4, a disparity that proved deadly. Donovan states, "In the battle's tight quarters, the Springfield was a liability. This technological mismatch, ignored by Custer, tilted the fight decisively toward the native side." Custer's decision to split his 600 men and ignore warnings was a masterclass in hubris. Dividing his force against 1,500 warriors, he gambled on speed and surprise, tactics that had worked against smaller tribes. His scouts, including Crow ally White Man Runs Him, pleaded for caution, citing the camp's size. Custer, adjusting his hat, waved them off, driven by a thirst for glory. As Ambrose remarks, Custer's arrogance was his undoing, a fatal flaw in a commander. This miscalculation, rooted in underestimating his foe, set the stage for a defeat that would echo through history. Native oral traditions, preserved by Lakota elder Joel Medicine Crow, align uncannily with archaeological findings. Stories from warriors like White Bull, passed down through generations, describe soldiers' panic and the warriors' relentless advance. Medicine Crow's grandfather, White Man Runs Him, a Crow scout, survived by fleeing early, his account detailing the battle's sprawl across 5 miles. Utley writes, "These oral histories, once scorned, are now validated by science." The convergence of bones, bullets, and native voices rewrites the battle's story, affirming the Lakota and Cheyenne as not just victors but chroniclers of truth. For over a century, white historians cast aside native accounts of the Battle of Little Bighorn, favoring a romanticized tale of George Armstrong Custer's gallantry. They painted the 7th Cavalry's defeat as a noble sacrifice, dismissing Lakota and Cheyenne testimonies as unreliable. Scholars like Frederick Jackson Turner, writing in the 1890s, glorified Custer as a martyr of westward expansion, ignoring the 1,500 warriors who outfought him. As historian D. Brown laments, the white man's narrative erased the native voice, perpetuating a myth. This bias, rooted in cultural prejudice, sidelined the truth, elevating a flawed commander while marginalizing the victor's perspective. Only recent scholarship has begun to right this wrong, giving due weight to the oral histories that endured. One soldier's face, lost to time, was brought back to life by forensic artist Betty Pat Gatliff. Vincent Charley, a 28-year-old Swiss immigrant, emerged from a skull unearthed near the battlefield. Using clay and precision, Gatliff sculpted his features, revealing a young man with a strong jaw and weary eyes. His remains, marked by a bullet wound to the hip and a stick in his throat, told a grim story. Historian James Donovan notes, Charlie's reconstruction humanizes the fallen, reminding us they were not just soldiers but sons. This act of restoration, completed in the 1980s, bridges the gap between anonymous bones and a man who lived, fought, and died in a distant land. Mitch Boyer, a 38-year-old mixed-race scout, stands as a poignant figure in the battle's aftermath. His facial bones, found near Deep Ravine, bore the wear of a pipe smoker, with a crushed eye socket from a blunt blow. Identified by their unique traits, they confirmed Boyer's fate. Clad in a fringed jacket, he rode with Custer, choosing loyalty over escape. Before the end, he urged Crow scouts like White Man Runs Him to flee, saving their lives. As archaeologist Douglas Scott remarks, Boyer's sacrifice embodies the battle's complexity, a man caught between worlds. His death, among 268, underscores the personal costs woven into the conflict's larger tragedy. The native toll at Little Bighorn, often overshadowed, was significant. Over 50 warriors fell, their names recorded in tribal oral traditions, alongside an unknown number of women and children caught in the chaos. Unlike the 268 U.S. soldiers whose deaths were meticulously documented, Native losses were rarely counted by white chroniclers. Leaders like Lame White Man, a Cheyenne chief, died defending the camp. Historian Robert M. Utley writes, "The native dead were mourned in silence, their sacrifice ignored by history. This disparity in remembrance reflects a broader erasure. Yet the Lakota and Cheyenne fought not for glory but for survival, their losses a testament to their resolve." Sitting Bull's stand was more than a battle. It was a defiant act to preserve a way of life. At 45, with braided hair and a steady hand on his rifle, he led not just warriors but a community of 7,000, determined to protect their lands. The Little Bighorn was their ancestral ground, hunted for generations. As Brown states, Sitting Bull fought for identity, for the right to remain free. His call to arms, uniting tribes across 200 miles, was a cultural rallying cry against the U.S. policy of forced assimilation, which had already displaced 30,000 Plains Indians by 1876. This context elevates the battle beyond tactics into a struggle for existence. The Native victory, though resounding, was fleeting. By 1881, just 5 years later, the Lakota and Cheyenne were confined to reservations, their nomadic life outlawed. Sitting Bull, once a symbol of resistance, surrendered in 1881, his people reduced to 4,000 on the Standing Rock Agency. Over 200,000 acres of their land were ceded to the U.S., under treaties often signed under duress. Utley observes, Little Bighorn was a last gasp, a triumph that hastened their subjugation. The battle's aftermath saw 15,000 Native children sent to boarding schools by 1900, stripping away their culture. This bitter epilogue dims the victory's glow, marking the twilight of a way of life. Archaeologists Douglas Scott and Richard Fox rewrote the battle's history, unearthing truths long buried. From 1983 to 2000, their teams recovered 5,000 artifacts, including 1,500 cartridge cases, proving Native accounts of the battle's chaos. Their work validated oral histories, showing warriors outgunned Custer 4-1. Scott's 1994 report concluded, "The evidence aligns with Lakota and Cheyenne narratives, not the myth." By mapping bullet trajectories and bone wounds, they dismantled the last stand fable, replacing it with a narrative of Native prowess. Their findings, published in Archaeological Perspectives on the Battle of the Little Bighorn, shifted how historians view the conflict. Today, the Little Bighorn battlefield honors the Native fallen, a belated tribute to their courage. In 1999, a memorial was dedicated to over 50 warriors, with plaques bearing names like Two Moons and High Hawk. Red granite markers, distinct from the soldiers' white ones, now stand where they fell, a total of 26 across the site. As Connell notes, this recognition corrects a century of neglect. The National Park Service, managing 765 acres, now includes Native-led tours, with 12,000 visitors hearing their stories annually. This shift reflects a broader reckoning, acknowledging the victors who reshaped history. The myth of Custer endures, woven into American culture through over 200 films, 1,000 books, and annual reenactments in Hardin, Montana, drawing 5,000 spectators yearly. Paintings of Custer, saber-raised on Last Stand Hill, adorn museums, yet they distort reality. The 1941 film, They Died with Their Boots On, cast Custer as a tragic hero, ignoring his 268 men's rout. Donovan writes, "The myth serves to soothe the nation's ego, not to reveal truth." This sanitization obscures the Native triumph, perpetuating a narrative that glorifies defeat over the resilience of the Lakota and Cheyenne. The Lakota and Cheyenne's victory at Little Bighorn was a fleeting but fierce act of defiance. With 1,500 warriors, they faced 600 soldiers, their 45,000 rounds of ammunition, and prevailed in 90 minutes. Leaders like Crazy Horse, galloping through dust, rifle raised, embodied their unyielding spirit. Over 200 Henry rifles and 300 traditional weapons turned the tide. Brown declares, their stand was a monument to courage. Though the U.S. Army would return with 10,000 troops by 1877, crushing resistance, this moment of triumph, against overwhelming odds, remains a powerful symbol of Native resilience, a beacon in their struggle for identity. A single, unfired Springfield bullet, discovered near Last Stand Hill in 1983, lies as a haunting relic of a soldier's final moments. This .45 caliber round, still gleaming after 107 years, was likely dropped in panic as a trooper, perhaps no older than 20, fumbled to load his carbine. His blue uniform, soaked in sweat, would have clung to him as 1,500 Lakota and Cheyenne warriors closed in. Archaeologist Douglas Scott, who cataloged over 5,000 artifacts, notes, "This bullet captures the chaos, a snapshot of desperation. Found among 255 white marble markers, it symbolizes the 268 men who fell in 90 minutes, their dreams of glory snuffed out in a whirlwind of violence on the 25th of June, 1876. The Lakota and Cheyenne warriors were far from the primitive foe of American lore. They acquired firearms through trade, mastering a deadly arsenal. By 1876, over 800 warriors carried rifles, including 200 Henry repeaters, purchased from trading posts along the Missouri River. These weapons, costing the equivalent of 50 buffalo hides each, were prized for hunting and war. Leaders like Gall, clutching a Winchester, directed volleys with precision. Historian Robert M. Utley writes, "The natives' access to guns shattered the myth of technological inferiority. This adaptability, evidenced by 1,500 cartridge cases found across the battlefield, turned Little Bighorn into a stage where modern weaponry amplified ancient courage." The 7th Cavalry's ranks, 40% foreign-born, mirrored the era's social struggles. Of its 600 men, 240 hailed from Ireland, Germany, and England, with 10 from Switzerland, like Vincent Charley. These immigrants, averaging 22 years old, enlisted for $13 a month, escaping poverty or famine. Many, standing 5 feet 7 inches and weighing 150 pounds, bore scars of hard lives, as their bones later revealed. Historian James Donovan observes, "The 7th was a microcosm of America's underclass, bound by necessity, not valor. Their presence, among 268 dead, reflects a nation built on the sacrifices of those seeking a better life, only to find death in Montana's hills." Mitch Boyer, Custer's 38-year-old interpreter, chose loyalty over survival, a decision etched in tragedy. Half French, half Sioux, Boyer wore a fringed jacket as he rode beside Custer, his rifle slung across his back. On the 25th of June, he urged Crow scouts, including White Man Runs Him, to flee, sparing them as he faced certain death. His bones, identified by a crushed eye socket, were found near Deep Ravine, among 44 excavated remains. As archaeologist Douglas Scott states, Boyer's choice was a quiet heroism, bridging divided worlds. His sacrifice, amid the loss of 210 of Custer's men, underscores the personal stakes in a battle that consumed all. The battle's aftermath was a scene of horror, as surviving troopers buried 268 comrades under a relentless sun. From the 27th of June, 1876, Reno and Benteen's men, numbering 350, worked in shock, interring bodies where they lay. Over 200 corpses bore mutilations, scalped heads, severed limbs, leaving only 56 identifiable. One soldier, found with a stick in his throat, was likely Vincent Charley. Historian Evan S. Connell writes, "The burials were hasty, a grim duty amid carnage." The 255 marble markers, placed by 1890, map this devastation, from Last Stand Hill's 40 to Deep Ravine's scattered few, a permanent elegy to a regiment's end. Native warriors excelled in close combat, their axes and knives inflicting wounds as brutal as their rifles. Skeletons, like one near marker 128, showed shattered jaws and axe marks on femurs, signs of hand-to-hand ferocity. Over 100 bones bore cut marks, with 30 indicating scalping. Warriors like White Bull, wielding a tomahawk, struck with precision, as oral accounts confirm. Utley notes, "Close quarters fighting was the natives' domain, where cavalry training faltered." This prowess, evident in 200 traditional weapon wounds, complemented their 800 firearms, creating a dual threat that overwhelmed Custer's 600 men in 90 minutes. The Little Bighorn battlefield, sprawling over 765 acres, resembles a crime scene, its artifacts narrating chaos, not heroism. Over 5,000 items, 1,500 cartridges, 2,000 bullets, a wedding ring on a finger bone were unearthed by 2000. Each was mapped, revealing native firing lines along ridges and trooper collapses in ravines. Scott's 1994 study, analyzing 47 firearm types, proved warriors outshot soldiers 4-1. Connell remarks, "The ground itself indicts the myth of a gallant stand. This forensic approach, blending science and native testimony, dismantles Custer's legend, honoring the Lakota and Cheyenne's tactical triumph." Sitting Bull's Defiance, at 45, embodied the native spirit, a legacy of resistance against cultural erasure. His call, "It will be a good day to die," rallied 7,000 people, including 1,500 warriors, to protect their way of life. By 1876, 30,000 Plains Indians faced displacement, with 200,000 acres lost to treaties. Brown declares, "Sitting Bull's stand was a cry for survival." Though his victory on the 25th of June, 1876, delayed the inevitable, by 1881, his people, reduced to 4,000, were confined. His unyielding resolve, echoed in over 50 fallen warriors, remains a beacon of courage, a testament to a people's fight for identity. The echoes of Little Bighorn still whisper across Montana's hills, where Lakota and Cheyenne warriors, with 1,500 rifles and unyielding hearts, carved a victory on the 25th of June, 1876. Their triumph, costing 268 U.S. lives in 90 minutes, was a fleeting defiance, as 4,000 survivors faced reservations by 1881. Honoring their 50 fallen, we ponder, what other truths lie buried, ready to redefine history? The native spirit, vibrant in Sitting Bull's stand, pulses on, urging us to listen to a past that refuses to be silenced.